Yamunatiravanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradhari Jaya Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yamunatiravanachari Yamunatiravanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Srila Prabhupada 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada Shri Prabhupada ki Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudiraye Nasta Prayeshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavate Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki. So reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 1, Text 1. Yeah. I was just thinking that Srila Prabhupada's spiritual master, Bhaktisiddhanta, he had said that one can give a talk on any verse of the Srimad Bhagavatam for a whole month. And I think if there's any verse that can definitely happen, it's this verse, the first one itself. Yeah, there's actually so much in it, in the verse itself, and the purport is also fairly long. But before we get into the verse itself, we can just talk about a little bit about the history of the Srimad Bhagavatam. The first three verses spoken by anyone remember who speaks the first three verses here in the Bhagavatam? Like in the book itself, it's Vyasadeva saying these, and he's the one who's compiled all the Vedas, and he's, but in these verses, and later in the Bhagavatam itself, he talks about himself in a third person. But yeah, he's speaking here. There's the first verse of the Bhagavatam. And of course, later Shukadeva Goswami comes and he speaks to Parikshit Maharaj, and that's the content of the Bhagavatam. So the setting in the Bhagavatam is that there are these sages, and as you see, the first chapter, the name of the chapter is Questions by the Sages, and they basically are having a conference in the forest. And because they're concerned, they're concerned for the well-being of the world. Maybe because they could see the news from the future from the news channels. There's so much going on that's just totally off in this world. And I was just in India, and if you think American news channels are dramatic, just wait till you see the Indian ones. I was there. I was like, oh my God, this is like really, really dramatic. But yeah, if you just turn on a news channel, you'll see there's so many things that are just simply plainly going wrong, or just that don't just sit well with you. So for the sages, they could see actually that as time progresses and the age of Kali, or the Iron Age, is going to settle in more and more, things are going to be more and more haywire. So they were actually genuinely concerned, and so they met in the forest of Naimisharanya, to discuss. And then in that, they are asking these. They asked 6 questions, and I forget who was presiding on that. Ramaharshana Sutta was presiding in that assembly, and then in that context, then they talked about how Shukadeva Goswami talked to Parikshit Maharaj, and that's the whole Srimad Bhagavatam. Srimad Bhagavatam is conversations within conversations within conversations. There's a lot of, there's many layers, many layers, many layers. What are you saying? It's like Inception. Yep. If you have seen the movie Inception, it's like Inception. But yeah, but that's the background, and I was appreciating the fact that the Srimad Bhagavatam is not just a text for knowledge. It's not just a text for scriptural study or academic study, or it comes from a place where people were actually, there were these sages who actually cared about other people. So it actually comes from a place of care, and it comes from a place from the heart, and that's why devotional service is also so prominent in the Srimad Bhagavatam, of course, because there's no other way to know Krishna. It's not through academic study, through scriptural study. It's not through knowledge. It's only through devotional service. It's only through bhakti. And so that is the origin of Srimad Bhagavatam. And so in the first verse itself, Vyasadeva really establishes who Krishna is. And after this, Krishna comes much later in the first canto. He comes, I believe, in the 8th chapter. In the 6th chapter? Oh, when he's leaving Hastinapur. No. Driving Arjuna. For when Ashwatthama throws this weapon. And that's when Krishna comes later in the Srimad Bhagavatam, in the first canto itself. But after this, so in the first verse itself, Vyasadeva establishes Krishna as the absolute truth, and then Krishna then appears in that very dramatic scene, which I won't know spoiler issue, but he appears later in the first canto. All right. I guess we can do the verse. The meter is long. Should we just try to do it together, or call response? What do you suggest? All right. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Janmadasya yatonvayad itarataschaarteshva abhigyaswarat. Tene Brahma Hridaya Adi Kavaye Muyanti Yat Suraya Tejo Varimidam Yata Vinimayo Yatra Trisargom Risha Namna Svena Sada Nirasta Kuhukam Satyam Param Dhimahi. Like to chant? Janmadasya yatonvaya itaratascha vigyasvara Tene Brahma Hridaya Adikavaye Muhyante Yatsuraya Tejo Vari Mridam Yata Vinimayo Yatra Trisargom Risha Namna Svena Sada Nirasta Kukam Satam Param Dhimahi.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Janmadiyasya yatonvayaditarataschatheshu vidyansvarat.
Janmadasya yatonvayaditarataschatheshu vigyasvarat.
Tene Brahma Hridayadikavaye muyanti yatsurayah.
Tene Brahma Hridaya Adikavaye Muyanti Yasuraya
Tejo Vari Mridam Yatha Vinimayo Yatra Trisargam Risha Namna Svena Sada Nirasta Kuhakam Satyam Param Dhimahi.
Namna Svena Sada Nirasta Kukam Satam Param Dhimahi. Anyone else? Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Janmadasya yatonvayaditarataschathesva vigyasvara Tene Brahma Hridaya Adikavaye Muyanti Yasuraya Tejo Vari Mridam Yata Vinimayo Yatra Trisargom Risha Damna Svena Sada Nirasta Bhukam Satam Param Dhimahi. Let's take a word to it together. Om, O my Lord, Namah, offering my obeisances, Bhagavate, unto the personality of God, Vasudevaya, unto Vasudev, the son of Vasudev, O Lord Sri Krishna, the primeval Lord, Janma Adi, creation, sustenance, and destruction, Asya, of the manifested universes, Yata, from whom, Anvaya, directly, Itarata, indirectly, Cha, and Arteshu, purposes, Avijja, fully cognizant, Swaraj, fully independent, Tene, imparted, Brahma, the Vedic knowledge, Vida, consciousness of the heart, Ya, one who, Adi Kavaye, onto the original created being, Muyanti, our illusion, Yat, about whom, Surya, great sages and demigods, Teja, fire, Vari, water, Mridam, earth, Yatha, as much as, Vinimaya, action and reaction, Yatra, whereupon, Visarga, three modes of creation, creative faculties, Amrisha, almost factual. Dhamna, along with all transcendental paraphernalia. Svena, self-sufficiently. Sada, always. Nirasta, negation by absence. Bhuvakam, illusion. Satyam, truth. Param, absolute. Dhimahi, I do meditate upon. So as we read the translation, just take note of the various things Vasudeva is saying about Krishna, and then we'll go over it again. All right, together, a translation by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. O my Lord, Sri Krishna, son of Vasudeva, O all-pervading personality of Godhead, I offer my respectful obeisances unto you. I meditate upon Lord Sri Krishna because he is the absolute truth and the primeval cause of all causes of the creation, sustenance, and destruction of the manifested universes. He is directly and indirectly, and he is independent because there is no other cause beyond him. It is he only who first imparted the Vedic knowledge onto the heart of Brahmaji, the original living being. By him, even the great sages and demigods are placed into illusion. As one is bewildered by the illusory representations of water seen in fire or land seen on water, only because of him do the material universes, temporarily manifested by the reactions of the three modes of nature, appear factual. Although the reaction of the three, although they're unreal, I therefore meditate upon him, Lord Shri Krishna, who is eternally existent in the transcendental abode, which is forever free from the illusory representations of the material world. I meditate upon him, for he is absolute truth. Anything that stuck out to you? Any descriptions of Krishna that sticks out to you from the translation? He's the son of Vasudeva. Yes. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudeva. Yeah. Yeah, Vasudeva is the father, and Krishna's Vasudeva, the son of Vasudeva. Yeah. What else? He's Swarat. He governs himself. Yeah. He's supremely independent. Yeah. He's what? Forever free from the modes, is it? Is that what it was? Yeah. Eternally existent. Yes. Yeah. Anything else? He controls all what? Perspective. Yeah. And all the sages and demigods are placed into illusion by him. Yeah. What else? Anything else? Yeah, he knows of everything. Yeah. And the cause of all causes of the creation, sustenance and destruction of the manifested universes. Yeah, he's directly and indirectly conscious of all manifestations. All right. So let's go to the purport. If we can do, it's a long purport. Let's see. Yeah, we can start reading, and then I'll probably interject at some points. Are they?
It's personal activities. It talks about him.
Yeah.
Instructing from him. So, because even with all of those things, sometimes a person still has, it's just some flower, but then directly instructing.
Yeah, he directly instructed Brahma. Yeah. Thank you. All right, and I'd like to read the purport. You have the mics. Thanks. If you just wait for the mic. All right.
Obeisances unto the personality of Godhead, Vasudeva, directly indicate Lord Sri Krishna, who is the divine son of Vasudeva and Devaki. This fact will be more explicitly explained in the text of this work. Sri Vyasadeva asserts herein that Sri Krishna is the original personality of Godhead, and all others are his direct or indirect plenary portions or portions of the portion. Srila Jiva Goswami has even more explicitly explained the subject matter in his Krishna Sandarbha, and Brahma, the original living being, has explained the subject of Sri Krishna substantially in his treatise named Brahma Samhita. In an Upanishad, the Samaveda, it is also stated that Lord Sri Krishna is the divine son of Devaki. Therefore, in this prayer, the first proposition holds that Lord Sri Krishna is the primeval Lord, and if any transcendental nomenclature is to be understood as belonging to the absolute personality of Godhead, it must be the name indicated by the word Krishna, which means the all-attractive. In Bhagavad Gita, in many places, the Lord asserts himself to be the original personality of Godhead, and this is confirmed by Arjuna, and also by great sages like Narada, Vyas, and many others. In the Padma Purana, it is also stated that out of innumerable names of the Lord, the name of Krishna is the principal one. Vasudev indicates the plenary portion of the personality of Godhead, and all the different forms of the Lord, being identical with Vasudev, are indicated in this text. The name Vasudev particularly indicates the divine son of Vasudeva and Devaki. Sri Krishna is always meditated upon by the Paramahamsas, who are the perfected ones among those in the renounced order of life.
So yeah, one thing to note in this first paragraph itself, when Prabhupada starts speaking, and the purport, and this is the first purport Prabhupada's writing for the Srimad Bhagavatam. And the very first thing that Prabhupada does is that he starts citing these various sources. He starts citing Jiva Goswami, he starts citing other the Upanishad, Brahma Samhita, and so forth. And that's the sign of not just a scholar but an authentic source of knowledge. That even in normal research papers, they actually want you to quote. There's a certain number of sources one must cite. Otherwise, it's not actually very sound research. And so in this research of the Bhagavatam as well, Prabhupada would use these various texts from the previous acharyas, and he would always rely on them for commentary. And so that's why Prabhupada has, he's mentioning Jiva Goswami and and just these other sources. And that, that always adds credibility. And, when we are sharing Krishna consciousness with others, and, we could talk about how the Bhagavad Gita in the chapter 8, verse 34 says this and that. But also one can just share what one has realized from just your journey in Krishna consciousness. And it's always nice to cite sources, and it's always nice to say, in the Bhagavad Gita, it's this is said and so forth. But also, it's also nice when one shares their own realizations in their own words. And of course, Prabhupada does that often. And there are many times actually where Prabhupada shares his realizations, and it is based on the previous spiritual masters. One that always struck me in one of the purports, and he didn't even cite the source itself, but he was actually quoting Jiva Goswami, and it's connected with this verse where Jiva Goswami in one of his books, and I believe it was in the Bhagavad Sandarbha, he's talking about God, the concept of God, and he talks about how God has to be inconceivable. That if God is not inconceivable, he's not God. There has to be something about God, at least something, if not everything, that has to be inconceivable. And is there, if a random person walking on a street, they would just not be able to come up with the idea that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is this blue boy who plays with his friends, has these gopis, and he plays his flute, and the gopis come in the middle of the night. You can't just come up with it, and at the same time, it's just this really extraordinary activity that Krishna does. And so that's the point Jiva Goswami is making, that God has to be inconceivable. And sometimes people, they say if God is real, then they must show himself to me, and it's just come right in front of me. And it's like saying, if President Biden is real, he must come right in front of me. Or even the mayor of Gainesville, for that matter. If the mayor of Gainesville is real, they must come right in front of me. It's like, okay, can you like move along, please? Stopping traffic here. It's like a crazy person, It's like, so the same thing applies to the Supreme Personality of God, right? Who's, there's the mayor of Gainesville, and then the authority keeps growing all the way up to the Supreme Person who's in charge of all these universes. So yeah, the Supreme Person is not just going to show up by the whims of anyone, but when one has a loving relationship with somebody, then they will happily be there for them. So the same applies to Krishna. Anyway, so yeah, the point being that Prabhupada often interweaves these various realizations he has with the words of the acharyas, and also for us, that is also how we can also share Krishna consciousness, that we do have our genuine realizations, but they're based on what Prabhupada speaks in the Bhagavatam and the previous acharyas and our spiritual masters. So yeah. Anything else check out in this paragraph before we go ahead? Yeah, go again,
One thought that came up is ultimately the Bhagavatam is about showing something very intimate about Krishna in the 10th canto and his home, showing his home and his heart. But we have to start, the Bhagavatam is like different parts of Krishna's body. You have to start at the feet. You have to first establish that it is actually God. Otherwise, you won't be able to understand Krishna in the other ways, more intimate ways. Yeah. So first, all the proofs that this is the Supreme Person and this is God.
Yeah. Thanks, bro. Yeah, actually, and Prabhupada talks about in the next few paragraphs about that.
In that example you gave of persons demanding that God be before them, it actually has a seed of the living entity's desire to have relationship with the Supreme. And the example you used is so appropriate. If no person would even demand that the mayor be before them, but somehow in their twisted thinking, they know that there's like inherent some idea of a relationship with God, so they can make that type of unreasonable demand of the Supreme Person. But an ordinary person, no one's going to respond to me in that regard. It's actually just a seed, but it's all twisted up. And if you could help someone understand that even your request, as silly as it sounds, has that seed there, it give them some moment of reflection, perhaps.
Thanks, Bruce. Thanks for the point. Yeah, that there is that intricate relationship, that innate relationship with Krishna, and that's where it comes from.
Yes. Otherwise, they wouldn't make such a ridiculous request.
Yeah.
Also, like Prabhupada was asked one time, "Can you see Krishna?" And he was like, "Yes, of course I can see Krishna. Why can you not see? Or can you see Krishna?" And she was like, "No," or something like that. And he said, "Why can you not see? Do you want to see Krishna?" And she said, "You know what, you're right. No, like I'm not actually wanting to see Krishna." But he is in front of us, like at all times, like he's around us and we can see him. We just can't demand it. It's through love. We have to see through eyes of love.
All right. Anyone else like to read the next paragraph? Rasikata? All right. Vasudev, yeah.
Vasudev, or Lord Sri Krishna, is the cause of all causes. Everything that exists emanates from the Lord. How this is so is explained in later chapters of this work. This work is described by Mahaprabhu Sri Chaitanya as the spotless Purana, because it contains the transcendental narration of the personality of Godhead Sri Krishna. The history of the Srimad Bhagavatam is also very glorious. It was compiled by Sri Vyasadeva after he had attained maturity in transcendental knowledge. He wrote this under the instructions of Sri Naradaji, his spiritual master. Vyasadeva compiled all Vedic literatures containing the 4 divisions of the Vedas, the Vedanta Sutras or the Brahma Sutras, the Puranas, the Mahabharata, and so on. But nevertheless, he was not satisfied. His dissatisfaction was observed by his spiritual master, and thus Narada advised him to write on the transcendental activities of Lord Sri Krishna. These transcendental activities are described specifically in the Bhagavatam's 10th canto, which is considered its substance. But in order to reach the very substance, one must proceed gradually by developing knowledge of the categories.
So yeah, this also gives more insight into how the Srimad Bhagavatam came about. Vyasadeva was, his Veda means knowledge, and Vyasa means one who divides or compiles. And so he started compiling all the Vedas, all the knowledge. And so, he wrote these various he wrote the Vedanta compiled the Vedanta Sutra, the 4 Vedas, the Puranas, and the Mahabharata, and so on. But he was still not satisfied. Have you ever had a feeling when you're not satisfied in your life? Never. Ever had a feeling when it's like something's not right, or something's not setting well, or I mean, for Vyasadeva it was basically a crisis actually, and then at that point his spiritual master appeared, Narada Muni, which we'll see it's actually in the first canto later. The Vedas are a vast body of knowledge, and these Puranas. So the Puranas are actually also based on the 3 modes. There are Puranas or texts that are in the mode of ignorance. There are Puranas or texts that are in the mode of passion, and then those in the mode of goodness. And the Srimad Bhagavatam that's why Prabhupada points out that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said that the Srimad Bhagavatam is a spotless Purana. It's actually beyond the 3 modes. And so these various Puranas in different modes, they actually give ways for people to make advancement in their spiritual lives through different methods. And some of them, even recommend worshipping other demigods and so forth, or seeing those demigods as a supreme. But we understand, and that's why Chaitanya Mahaprabhu asked the 6 Goswamis to really establish Krishna as a supreme person, to establish the Bhagavatam as the spotless Purana, as the topmost book to be studied. And so the Srimad Bhagavatam is the cream of all Vedic knowledge. If there's anything that you feel is like the best part of a meal, whatever people like different things, it's the cherry on top or the cream or whatever else, it's like that. The Bhagavatam is that. And so, it's our good fortune to be able to study that. But so Vyasadeva was dissatisfied. What do you normally do when you have a crisis? What's your go-to reaction? What do you normally do? Call a friend? Was that? Yeah, go to a mentor. Yeah. What else? What do normal people do out there? Like, are we? Yeah, we are not normal. Was that? They call it what? A why? Oh yeah. Why me? Why me? Yeah. Was that asked for the manager? Yeah. They self-medicate. Yeah. They go to social and university at the food. Yeah, just eat. Yeah. They compensate through something else, right? Medication, food. Yeah. There's always like something, or of course intoxication. And when there's a crisis, people want to kind of numb themselves out. What else? Anything else that people do when there's a crisis in their life? When all else fails, call mom. Mama. It's actually true. In World War I, I believe, when the British soldiers were dying in the trenches, and you would hear these soldiers calling out as they're dying, calling out to their mothers. They would actually just call out to them. Of course, the mothers weren't there, but they just call out to their mothers. And Prabhupada said that unconditional love that is in the spiritual world, the closest thing that gets to it is the love of the mother for her child. Yeah.
They call out to God. Sometimes they do if they know that there's no other place to hang their hat on. They'll call God. And that's where the process actually begins. Excuse me.
Yeah. And actually, in World War I also, I believe there was a statement made by the Prime Minister that there are no atheists in the foxholes, in the foxhole. What else? What have you all personally done when there was a crisis? What were some, before maybe? Before. Before. Yeah, sure.
And really, like, serious? Hare Krishna. Well, when I didn't pray, sometimes I would get really angry. Like, I had a dream that I was this angry recently, and I like would punch things like walls or trees, just like something to take my aggression out.
Yeah. They made a business out of it, They have these places where they go, where they let you break stuff, and and that's how you get rid of your rage. With Vyasadeva, and also for us, like when Arjuna was baffled in the battlefield, he turned to Krishna, and it's actually a wealth to be able to turn to someone who actually knows what the purpose of the material world is. Or to a text for that matter, like the Srimad Bhagavatam. The book Srimad Bhagavatam is an incarnation of Krishna. So actually, one can really form a relationship with this book itself. And believe it or not, the book speaks back to you. And it does. And many people have that experience. The Bhagavad Gita or the Bhagavatam for that matter. And when one really treats it as one's guiding light, as one's spiritual master, or as somebody who could actually help you, the book actually does speak to us, because it is Krishna himself as well. And in this context, when Vasudeva was distraught, he just didn't know what was wrong. His spiritual master appeared, Narada Muni, and Narada Muni actually somewhat chastised him a bit, and he said, what you have done is, the word he used was very strong, and it was basically calling it abominable, that you have not glorified how, devotional service to Krishna. And so from that, the Srimad Bhagavatam came, that the sum and bone of everything, the cream of all these texts, is that one should do devotional service to Krishna. And there is nothing else that can satisfy the heart as much as doing devotional service to Krishna. And that's more of some of the context for Srimad Bhagavatam. Any other thoughts before we go ahead to one more paragraph before 8:30? Yes, please.
Often if I'm confused about something or in a crisis, I'll actually turn to the Bhagavatam and just read some, or maybe chant, and it's amazing. A lot of times there's perfect clarity that happens as a result of that. I just needed to get out of my head.
Thank you. There was a Krishna House resident years ago, and we were just sharing how, the Bhagavad Gita or the Bhagavatam's kind of spoken to us. And he was saying, I read the Gita every night, but one day I was so tired, and, I was like, I don't know if I can read tonight. And I opened the book where I left the day before, and luckily it was a very short purport, and I really felt that the Bhagavad Gita cared about me. Because that day was a short purport. I could read that one verse and just go to bed. So, Krishna reciprocates in whatever way we want, So for him, that was so faith-building. But and as Prabhupada points out in the purport itself, the Bhagavatam, and Gopajivan Prabhu pointed out that, the Bhagavatam is really about getting to know Krishna. And so it starts off with establishing Krishna as Supreme Person, but then it builds on that, and then we get to the 10th canto where we really, are ready to hear about Krishna's pastimes. Because that's another thing, when actually the British came to India and they heard about Krishna's pastimes and Krishna stealing butter, and they're like, we worship a thief, and and you worship somebody who goes out with other people's spouses. Like they were just so, and yeah, they were like these Christian missionaries. They were like aghast to hear this. But one actually has to study the Srimad Bhagavatam from the first canto, and the first canto is referred to as the feet. You start at the feet, and so the first, I believe, first and the second cantos are all about sambandha. Sambandha means relationship. So we study about what is our relationship with God, what is our relationship with Krishna, and who is Krishna basically. And this verse itself, as you saw, we discussed how it just talks about what is Krishna, what is the tattva, what is the substance of Krishna. He's the supreme being, everything comes from him, and so forth. So that always has to establish that sambandha, that relationship. All right, let's go on. Anyone like to read the third Kiara? You want to read the third paragraph?
It is natural that a philosophical mind wants to know about the origin of the creation. At night he sees the stars in the sky, and he naturally speculates about their inhabitants. Such inquiries are natural for man because man has a developed consciousness which is higher than that of the animals. The author of Srimad Bhagavatam gives a direct answer to such inquiries. He says that the Lord Shri Krishna is the origin of all creations. He is not only the creator of the universe, but the destroyer as well. The manifested cosmic nature is created at a certain period by the will of the Lord. It is maintained for some time, and then it is annihilated by his will. Therefore, the supreme will is behind all cosmic activities. Of course, there are atheists of various categories who do not believe in a creator, but that is due to a poor fund of knowledge. The modern scientist, for example, has created space satellites, and by some arrangement or another, these satellites are thrown into outer space to fly for some time at the control of the scientist who is far away. Similarly, all the universes with innumerable stars and planets are controlled by the intelligence of the personality of Godhead.
Yeah, it's funny because today India launched this satellite. It's called Chandrayana. Chandra is the moon, and Yana means what is Yana is like the vehicle, yeah. So it's supposed to touch moon today in a few hours, I believe. And I was just reading this and I was like, oh, that's interesting. But yeah, so Prabhupada's point is that, yeah, even scientists, they can come up with these little satellites that go around, planets. So, Krishna, Supreme Person, of course, there's a lot more than just satellites. Also, another point I was thinking about, Prabhupada makes this point in one of his lectures. He makes this point about relative truths, because the last three words of the verse, Satyam Param Dhimahi, it means that Krishna is the supreme truth, the absolute truth. Param means topmost, so he's the absolute truth. And so Prabhupada makes this point that in the verse also talks about how there are things made out of water, fire, and earth come out of Krishna. And so Prabhupada makes this point that we pay, he says that we pay obeisances to things made out of water, earth, and fire. And of course, that's the body, but also everything else out there, and the buildings and so forth. And Prabhupada was giving this example of when there's a policeman or constable. Again, the body is made out of those three elements. And when a cop is on the road and they tell you to stop at a stop sign, you stop. And Prabhupada said, that's your way of paying respect to that person. You're obeying that, you're just basically obeying that person. And so Prabhupada is making this point that there are so many relative truths in this world. This world is full of relative truths. And people, especially in this age, people fight a lot about relative truths. But there's only one absolute truth, that is Krishna. And these various relative truths actually really they reconcile in that one absolute truth. And so yeah, that is Krishna. And all right, that's almost 8:30. It's 8:29. All right, that's most of the points I had. I'm just gonna stop here. And but this is the start of the Bhagavatam, and the next verse is also very full of substance, and it talks about why the Srimad Bhagavatam is the text to study about God. And all right, I'll stop here. Any further thoughts, comments, or questions?
First, I just want to say you are correct. It is chapter 8 where Krishna appears. One of the things that really strikes me about this is how Srila Prabhupada, with no money, no followers, in his mid-60s, takes up the task of translating all the 16,000 verses of Srimad Bhagavatam, and with this, and he starts off with like a 5-page purport. So, I mean, just incredible determination and that vision of doing the whole thing. It's awesome.
What else? Anything else stands out? Srimad Bhagavatam, what do you call it? The sure cure for insomnia. But yeah, if there's anything that you can get out of it, at least you'll get that. One time we were traveling, or we were on a trip somewhere, and I started reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, and yeah, there were just 2 other devotees next to me. We were just on this one seat, and they got, oh yeah, please read. You read loudly, and we will hear. I said, sure. So I started reading, and I really started getting into it. It was, and I just kept reading and reading and reading loudly. And then this one devotee from the back tapped on my head, and he pointed at the other 2 devotees. I was like, oh, yeah, I guess I might as well just read to myself. Yeah. On that, anything else before we end? Rantraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki? Mahaprasade Govind.